Hello everybody, my name is Matthew, and today I'm going to speak with you briefly about the moral theory of utilitarianism. So to start, I'm going to define utilitarianism. I am then going to talk about philosophers Jeremy Bentham, as well as John Stuart Mills, and how they contributed to the theory. I'm then going to address concepts that make up utilitarianism, as well as the two utilitarianism theories. Lastly, I'm going to address the benefits and drawbacks of utilitarianism views. I hope you learned something new from my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed my teaching video. Follow me! Utilitarianism is a moral theory that focuses on our consequences and considers intentions as unimportant. It determines what is right and wrong based on our actions. Utilitarianism is an absolutist theory of teleology that promotes actions to maximize happiness and rejects actions that cause harm or dissatisfaction. Utilitarianism theory is more focused on a collective group, as opposed to specifically individuals. Utilitarians choose to create the most happiness within a group, even if it creates less happiness for themselves. In other words, they focus more on the group around them as opposed to themselves. Unitarianism can be in relation to hedonistic moral theory. With hedonistic views, we tend to pursue pleasure and happiness and avoid pain. Utilitarians assume that this moral theory should be applied equally to everyone. Philosopher Jeremy Bentham had a qualitative view on our happiness. He describes the concept as his greatest happiness principle in his book, The Introduction to Principles of Morals and Legislation, in 1789. Bentham believed that everyone's happiness counts or is significant, and no one's happiness is more important than another's. John Stuart Mills is another philosopher that admired Bentham's work. Mills believed that qualitative goods and social goods improves human happiness. Things that are more pleasurable to humans can be considered more valuable in our lives. The biggest difference between these philosophers' perspectives on utilitarianism is that Bentham's view bases happiness on intangible factors, such as love and relationships, and Mill's view is based on happiness of tangible factors, such as getting a new car. There are two types of utilitarianism theories: act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. Act utilitarianism suggests that in any situation, you should choose the option that produces the greatest good for the greatest number of people. However, this is not always the right decision. For example, if you have 4 people in a hospital whose lives depend on receiving organs, heart, lung, kidney, and liver, a healthy bystander can be sacrificed to save all 4 patients. Based on act utilitarianism theory, the scenarios argues that this decision is the greatest good for the greatest number, as you are saving 4 lives by sacrificing just 1. However, many people would consider this action as wrong or unethical because you are sacrificing an innocent life in the process. No moral theory should demand the taking of an innocent life. Based on the weakness of act utilitarianism, philosophers adjusted the theory and created rule utilitarianism. Rule utilitarianism states that we have to live by rules that are likely to create the greatest good for the greatest number of people. This eliminates the immoral act of killing one person for the greater good of many, as everyone is sticking to the moral rule book. There are other drawbacks to the whole concept of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism theory focuses on the overall goodness of our actions, but it doesn't consider how these actions affect other people. Since we can't predict future outcomes, it is often difficult for us as humans to understand whether the consequences of our actions are good or bad. How do we know which course of action creates the best outcome for everyone involved? Utilitarianism also doesn't take into consideration human values, such as individual rights and human justice. Lastly, happiness is a subjective concept that can't be measured in tangible ways. Utilitarian views also has its benefits within our society. It is a simple theory to follow that has universal application in our daily lives. It is also universally shared value that most people follow. Utilitarianism theory also believes that everyone on Earth's happiness is equally valuable. No one's happiness is more important than another person's happiness. Lastly, utilitarianism is an intuitive theory where happiness is valuable, and therefore the more value we have in our lives, the better off we will be. So even though utilitarianism can potentially be considered one of the most reasonable approaches to determining what is right and wrong, it does have its evident conflicting limitations. So to recap, I have taught you about what the moral theory of utilitarianism is. I also touched upon the philosophers who had a large impact on the theory, as well as the main concepts that make up utilitarianism. Lastly, I talked about the two types of utilitarianism theories and the benefits and drawbacks of utilitarianism views. Thank you for listening to my video on the moral theory of utilitarianism, and hopefully you learned something new from my lesson.